unsure. If you just want to start, and we'll come to that later, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, I didn't even want to share this because I'm very public about how I started, and you can find it online if you really want to find it. And I just really wanted to maximize your time, but now it feels like I'm killing time before we're recording it, so I might as well go into it how I've gotten into the industry. So,
It is being recorded.
oh, brilliant! We are being recorded. Amazing. In which case, I'm Alex. I've been an AD for over 14 years, and literally that's all you need to know, because if you want to dig deeper into it, my CV is online, my IMDb is very public, so you can just look up what I've been doing. I've been mainly a first AD. In the recent years, I've been enjoying seconding as well, and I have to be honest, I kind of skipped thirding because I just didn't feel like it was really for me, for my personality. But I do appreciate that some people absolutely swear by it, that you have to go through each and every step. So in many ways, I'm an exception. So I'm going to start sharing my lovely slides, and you will get this after that. And I said this to myself, that I'm going to use abbreviations based on industry standards, so that if anything is unfamiliar on this screen, then hopefully I will just use the time right now to talk around it. But you might only see abbreviations like that on call sheets, so it's useful if you only get the short version of it, and you will have the recording of the long version anyway. So today I'm just very quickly going through the responsibilities and job roles within the AD department. And if you're interested in anything more, then feel free to either type your questions in the chat, or here, I'm not restricted to 1 hour only. If you want to stay a bit longer and ask questions, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. But this is a very brief overview of the AD department as it stands. And there are certain parts of it that only apply on a larger scale, because obviously the higher the budget is, the more extended the AD department can get. So there are certain job roles in the department that I'm only going to go through very briefly, so that you know that it exists, but you're not necessarily going to come across it unless you're on a certain budget level, when you literally have 40 ADs on set. So as the AD department, we are the people department, the soft skills department, and interpersonal dynamics, and a little bit of TLC, a little bit of tender loving care is most of what we're doing. Most of what we're responsible for on every single level of the department. We are responsible for communication and information distribution, but we are social animals as humans, and the beauty of our nebulous role is that if you're able to find out the person's communication style that you're communicating with, you're much more effective, you're much more time efficient, you're much more pragmatic, rather than sticking to your own communication style and thinking that you're a good communicator because you communicate well with a certain type of personality. So what I like about ADs, and what I'm looking for in the AD personality, are people who can adapt based on who they are talking to. Because when we're distributing information, we might be talking to very different personality types based on departments or based on roles within the departments. And even if you say the exact same string of words, that might translate very differently for the personality who's listening, for the department that is listening. So a huge part of our skill set is to actually understand how we're being heard and received, and that makes information distribution effective. Timekeeping is the bread and butter of what we do, and it's still baffling to me that some personality types just don't quite grasp the reality of time and how time works, and they genuinely think that when they say something will take 5 minutes, they genuinely believe that it's going to be 5 minutes, even if they've done that a million times before, just because they've never actually paid attention to time. So our job, a huge part of our job, is actually paying attention to time. And it's a very good little thing. I might go into anecdotes. You might see that my speech style is quite open-ended. It was on the last job actually that the running team, the AD team, have figured it out that it's a very good way of sticking to time to ask certain departments, how long are you going to take? And then in front of them, not in an accusatory way, just in a very lovely, very friendly, very joking way, they immediately click a timer on and they go, oh, 15 minutes. Brilliant. I'll be back in 15. And then that's an objective measure of time for all of us to understand that time is a very real thing. And we're not just talking about something that is we believe that we can do our job that fast. Because time is, in film, we never get budgeted for the amount of time that we want to have. We get budgeted for the minimum amount of time that something is doable. So creatives will always push for more time. Health and safety is it's an area of the industry itself that we are becoming more and more aware of, not just in terms of physical safety, but also mental health and safety. We're getting more educated about it, and we are paying more attention to the specificities between people, what they think is safe, because some people who have been doing this job for 40 years, they might not think that standing up on a piece of scaffolding that they've done for 40 years is dangerous, and the person who's never done it before might be freaking out from the ground. So health and safety, such as many things, is this nebulous evolving thing that we are getting more and more regulated about, but sometimes you will work with personality types who have a different conception about what health and safety is, and you will have to manage those people as well. And especially if you're in a junior role talking to a more senior person and they think something is totally safe and you feel that something is unsafe, you will have to come to a consensus between the two of you. And it might not always be a case of you winning that fight. It might be a case of assessing on a almost like a dynamic risk assessment way, assessing the situation at hand. Is it really a health and safety risk? Is it something that we should be worrying about, or is the person actually qualified of doing it? So health and safety is not just about doing a risk assessment in prep, or watching for cables, or watching for water spills on set. It's an ever-evolving assessment of the situation and around us, just an evolving set awareness around us. Is what we're doing safe? And not just in a physical way, also in a mental way. Providing general help for other departments. Even when you're a first AD, sometimes you stand in just so people can light on you. So we're still constantly helping other departments in whichever way we can. And it's more prominent for the junior roles, but on every single step of the way, some departments can get very isolated about it's not my department, I'm not touching it, I'm not helping. Especially technical departments, they don't tend to go out of their departmental boundaries, while the AD department is a bit more malleable in that term. And if we see that somebody needs help, we do chip in without overstepping other people's boundaries. And then setting the mood, the pace, and the morale is, again, a communication skill, and it's a style, and every single set will have a different vibe. But especially as a first AD, I very frequently realize that if I'm low energy, the entire mood of the set is just sinking to an energy level that is kind of my responsibility to bring up and keep alive for the entire time. So the structure of the AD department, you will get this. I've separated things in terms of people staying at base or people going on set, but obviously crowd starts at base and goes on set. And all of these roles appear both at base and on set. So base camp is where your day starts. It can be a parking lot, it can be a production office at a studio, it can be a tent in the middle of nowhere. And it can be 50 minutes. Well, hopefully not 50, but it can easily be like a 30-minute drive from set, or it can be literally in the same building. Base is it's a military term. It's a base camp for when your budget is getting bigger and bigger. It literally becomes a trailer park, because you would have a costume trailer, a makeup trailer, some kind of a dining bus, some kind of a catering truck, usually, if you're lucky, a production truck, an AD truck, and maybe a crew car park. And that is where everyone's day starts, because that's where they go for breakfast, or that's where we get people ready for in costume and makeup to go on set. So at base, if you're lucky, you would have a base runner or a base PA. Anytime that I mention PA, that's the American version of saying runner. But since we are shooting that many American productions, nowadays we're using PA more and more instead of runner. So that's why all the slashes are just the British version and the American version. So you would have a base runner or a base PA, a base third AD, and a second AD. Usually they stay at base for most of the day. And then crowd PAs, crowd thirds, and crowd seconds. Crowd second usually stays at base or even works from home nowadays. And crowd PAs and crowd thirds would start at base, and then they would go down on set with crowd. I'm going to expand on all of these later. On set, you would have, if you have the budget for it, you would have AD trainees. That's where some of you might start out. Screen Skills is doing very good trainee programs where they would place you with an already existing team and you are a trainee. Technically, you're a runner, you're not a trainee. Nobody treats you as a trainee, because once you're on set, they are like, oh my God, one more person, let's use them. So, but an AD trainee would be somebody who has a little bit less experience, or maybe transitioning from another department. And then you would have your floor runners, you would have your key floor runner, who's just, your key might be a little bit more experienced, might be doing it for a little more years. And if you have a set of PAs, then a key PA would be the one organizing and managing all of that team. And then you would have a third AD or a second. Weird naming, but in the States, they call it a second. They don't have a third AD. Don't know why you would have a second anyway. And then you would have a floor second, which only exists on very big budget jobs. And then you would have a first AD. What I missed from this list is actually a scheduling AD, now that I'm looking at it. But that is, again, that's a very separate thing, and that only exists, again, on bigger budget stuff. So as a base runner or a base PA, you are responsible for getting cast through the works. Getting them through the works means usually 3 things. Sometimes at base it's only 2 things. That's makeup and costume. 3 things is sound. You might be miking people on set, so you might be traveling before you're miking up. But if it's a more elaborate costume job, say if it's a period job, then you would take sound to base with you and you would mic at base. So then getting people through the works means 3 things, and being 100% means 3 things, not just 2 things. Then as a base runner, you split that responsibility with the set PA as well, depending on whether you're staying at base or traveling. But the act of traveling is your responsibility usually. Traveling also means between trailers, so that means between their cast trailer and the trucks, makeup truck, costume truck, and to set. All of that coordination all throughout the day usually falls on a base runner. Taking cast timings at base, you can only really say cast timings for arrival. Chair, which is a makeup chair, that's the first time when they go into the works. We do say chair, but if they by any means they have to start with costume, usually they start with makeup. But if by any means they have to start with costume, that's also the first time. So these timings for actors, sorry, I'm realizing that I do speak fast, and if I say anything that you don't understand because I'm trying to treat you as if you know this already. I'm just filling gaps. But if I'm saying anything that you have no idea about, you're more than welcome to ask questions. So I'm recognizing now that I am talking very fast. So for cast timings, this is for a paperwork reason, especially if you're working with SAG actors, with the actors who are under American union regulations. The time of arrival is the time when they actually land at base. Going into the chair is usually the makeup chair, but it can be a costume timing. It's the first time when they actually start the work. Then when they go on set, which is very different from when they step on, but usually stepping on, the step on time is not your responsibility. So you might not even know that timing because you might not even be with them on set. So when they travel to set, when they come back for lunch, and when they depart, so at the end of the day, when they get into the car and leave base, those are the timings that you would take as a base runner for cast, and then you relay those timings to your second AD or your base third. And then general help and TLC is just the bread and butter of all of us. As a floor runner, person who's on set, they might start at base, they might go straight to set. Your catering. So hospitality is a very useful skill to have, because a huge part of what a runner or a set PA is doing is related to making sure that people are well fed, they have water, they are well taken care of in terms of basic human needs. So you would set up a tea table, might take lunch orders for people. And if you have a location department, it's very important. That's why I've put in chairs and umbrellas. So if your entire shoot has well-stocked departments in every single department, still, tea tables are an AD department responsibility. Cast chairs and above-the-line chairs, ATL, above-the-line chairs, are AD department responsibilities. Umbrellas tea tables, it's a debate between locations and ADs, who's packing up the tea table at the end of the day, ADs. Umbrellas, it's a fight between costume and ADs, who's taking care of the umbrellas, ADs. Hand warmers, ADs. Blankets, ADs. But some ADs or some production people like to push it onto costume department, locations department. Technically, all of those fall under the AD department's responsibilities. And other departments will look at you whether we have umbrellas, we have blankets. And if we don't, then we're responsible for sorting them. As a floor runner, you would be general, you would be locking off, you would be controlling crowd, and you might go out running errands. Now, crowd control. So on the next slide, I will talk about crowd. There are certain specific phrases that mean something very specific for a department. So crowd control does not mean a crowd as a background crowd, SA crowd. The phrase crowd control will always mean general public, which, if you're well resourced, is either a locations job or a security job, especially if you're shooting on locations that are a bit iffy. But as ADs, especially on smaller jobs, it will fall on you. It will become a poor runner's job to explain it to the general public that on your home street we're shooting this little film, and for some weird reason you have to stop and wait here with me. And it's a thankless job. But crowd control means general public. And the key set PA coordinates the entire team of the floor runners. Crowd team. As a crowd PA, usually you would have more than one crowd PAs, so all of these responsibilities might be completely split between some of you. If you're just signing people in and that's what you're doing for the entire day because you have 400 people, then that's all you're doing. If you're just getting people through the works, because again, 400 people and they're coming in batches, that's all that you're doing. But if you're just dealing with 8 people, 10 people, 20 people, it might be just 1 or 2 people doing all of these jobs, and you might be jumping back and forth between all of these responsibilities. So as a crowd PA, you would be signing in and out essays supporting artists. So in this country, the three terms that are not frowned upon for background is essay, supporting artist, background, or crowd. We don't call them extras. They are not extras. In the States, it's a little bit different. They are a bit more lenient with the term extra, but in this country, people really frown upon calling them extras. So essays. So I usually call them essays or background here. Signing in and keeping an eye on essay timings. Now, if you ever want to go into crowd, it's a separate flavor to the AD industry, to the rest of the AD department. That's why I've left it on a complete different slide, because some people don't like crowd at all, and they don't find themselves comfortable working with crowd. But if you're interested, look up crowd regulations. The FAA is the industry body that regulates and controls hours and rates for crowd. So their timings and their rates might be changing. So I'm not going to say anything concrete on this, because, a few months from now, there might be a complete separate regulation and this recording might be completely outdated. But just look up what the timings are. Their timings, essay timings, are always different from crew timings. So the reason why crowd PAs are especially responsible for looking out for crowd timings is because usually crowd starts way before call time, especially if it's a large crowd, and they are working on a different hour measurement when their overtime kicks in. And their timings are extremely responsible for money, for overtime. So it might be that in the middle of the day, you will have to say to your third AD, your crowd third, that I'm so sorry to say, I know that we're 2 hours away from lunch, but these guys are going into broken lunch or they're going to go into overtime and I have to break them. That's why somebody needs to keep an eye on their timings, because it will be different from the rest of the crew. Getting essays through the works. So getting through the works, again, for essays, they hardly ever get mic'd unless they are a featured essay. So it would mean just the two things, going through makeup and costume. But essays, usually when they are a larger amount of people, it's a very different setup from cast. Cast gets a lot more specific attention. Crowd, they are usually going in at 3s, 2s, batches into costume, into makeup. So you're literally constantly monitoring people that you're done with this, you're done with that, now let's go. So you're pulling people in and out of costume and makeup and breakfast and coordinating. And when it gets to people in the 50s, 80s, 100s, it can get very messy, and it can be a very logistical job. Some people enjoy it, some people freak out about it, and that's perfectly fine. And then as a crowd PA, you would be traveling to set, back to base, coordinating lunch for the essays. Basically, you're responsible for their well-being. Now, the reason why I put helping out essay fittings in brackets is because this kind of stuff, so essay fittings or essay rehearsals in prep, only happen on very big jobs. And sometimes when, you have 40 people that you have to fit into a medieval costume, or they have to be elves or orcs or whatnot, then they would bring in a PA, they would call them a crowd PA, and they might not even be called back to the actual shoot. If you give off a good vibe and if you build a good reputation, then they will call you back. But rehearsals or essay fittings can be completely separate from the rest of the production, because it might happen months before they actually start shooting. So you might just be coming in for literally a day and then actually never make it to set. I did go on set with them, but I did a military boot camp with a bunch of essays at some point. It was literally just 2 days of them learning how to look like they know how to shoot and know how to march, and me standing in the corner be like, anybody wants tea, coffee? And sometimes this is all you do for the entire day in prep, when you just go on fittings or rehearsals. But it's a good gig if you get it. Oops, sorry, not done. Crowd third. Now, some jobs would only pay for a crowd third and use their set PAs. Some jobs will only pay for crowd PAs and use their third as a crowd third. Some jobs are fully split and you have your set team and you have your crowd team. So all of these responsibilities might be taken over by someone who's capable of doing it, someone who's done it before, or someone who just has the audacity to say that they can and they take the responsibility for it. But as a crowd third specifically, you would be responsible for obviously managing and coordinating the crowd PAs, but also dressing background. Now, the phrase dressing background means two very different things to two different departments. If a costume person, or if in a costume setting, somebody says, I'm dressing background, it is dressing. It is dressing in costume, it is dressing in clothes. If an AD, or in an AD context, we're saying dressing background, we're dressing to frame, we're dressing to camera, which means a third AD would look at a frame, put 50 people in front of camera and just go, stylistically, I'm dressing the frame. I like this person here. I don't like that person here. You would literally position people in a frame and create a sense of dynamism or movement that is realistic, or at least semi-realistic, with the amount of people that you have available. So dressing in this case is a stylistic phrase, not a clothing phrase. And then coordinating on-camera background action. As a crowd second, now, yours truly have only maybe 2 or 3 times ever in her career worked with a crowd second. So I, as a second AD, very often had to double up as a crowd second. And if you're just a crowd second, or if you have a crowd second working with you, they are just looking after a crowd, which means in prep, they would do a crowd breakdown and a crowd budget based on the script, based on the requirements, based on the schedule. And they would have a final sign off on any of the SA chits. Chits are, back in the day, they used to be actual paper receipts. Now it's all online paperless, but we're still calling them chits. It's a form of, like, it's somewhere between an invoice and a report sheet, a record of this is how much they've worked and this is how much they're going to get paid for what they've done. And signing off on it is a crowd second's responsibility. It's never going to be a PA responsibility. On set, when it was paper, it used to be the crowd third, but now if it's online, it will always be a second or a crowd second who actually says that, yes, they have worked these hours, yes, they should get this amount of money. That will never be a PA level responsibility. That's why a PA should report the actual time, so that you have that accuracy, and the crowd second or the second AD will trust the PA that if they signed off on time, they can sign off on money. And as a crowd second, you would be booking crowd and organizing fittings or rehearsals. So booking usually goes through an SA agency. But on smaller budget jobs, it might just be that you will have to put out posts online, or might ask your friends, or might rope in the producers and the director's family and have to organize with them to become background. But you, as the crowd second or the second, you're responsible for booking them, making sure that they get there on time, making sure that they know that what they're doing, and making sure that they're getting paid at the end of the day. As a base, so this slide, this is my little cheeky slide. Base third and floor second only exists on larger jobs when they have the money to split certain roles and responsibilities. A base third would take some of the responsibilities, very occasionally, from a base PA, but most of the responsibility from the second. So as a base third, I look at it purely as administration and paperwork, but they can be doing a lot more than that based on the complexity of the job. Say you have 40 main cast and 100 background, and the more people you have, it becomes more and more logistical and more time consuming to make sure that everybody is taken care of and that the day actually gets what it needs. As a second AD, you would take the more complex organizational stuff, and as a base third, you would get the more admin based stuff, more of the reporting or attending or coordinating, and as a second, you would be more organizing and thinking ahead and doing the logistics. So as a base third, you would be overseeing cast timings. So if you do have a separate base third, the second AD might not be doing any cast timings at all. They might just be completely handing it over to the base third, because timings will go on an AD report sheet. If you only have a second AD, it's called a second AD report. But if you have a third AD, it's just called an AD report sheet. It's the reason for the AD report sheet is to go into a larger report sheet, a production report that tells financiers and executive producers an accurate progress about how the shoot is going, whether we're on time, whether we're within budget. So a progress report, a daily progress report, is a production job, and an AD report is a small section of it that slots into many other departments' reports. So taking cast timings or typing up the AD reports and the SAG reports. So SAG is the American Actors Union, who would have their own timing requirements, their own rules and regulations that a production has to adhere to, their own overtime regulations, their own timing regulations, and their own report sheets that the ADs have to take care of and generate. And then if you have that many people, sometimes as a base third, you would take care of cast transport, cast fittings, makeup tests, things that are logistical. So organizing cast transport is whether you're booking taxis or whether you're employing unit drivers, you would be responsible for making sure that the drivers know where to go, when to pick up, when to drop off, and coordinating that actually happens. Fittings and makeup tests at base. Again, it might be a case that in prep, you don't have the time to go through all the costume fittings and all the makeup tests. Or it might be the case that in prep, you're not even fully cast yet, but your cast just gets confirmed while you're filming. So it might be a case that during filming, some of your makeup department, some of your costume department, usually your designers, would peel off and would take care of fittings, which means actors might be coming in to base, or they might be going into a costume house, or they might be going into production office, which might be a complete separate location from base and filming location. And so somebody needs to coordinate that those people get transport, they actually show up on time, they actually make it, they get home. And that is a separate coordination world that sometimes it falls under production. Sometimes it might be an APOC, an assistant production office coordinator, who deals with travel and transport. But sometimes it's an AD department job because production just hands it over that anything that has to do with cast, that's ADs. It's an ever-evolving relationship between departments. Floor second. So a floor second is again, they are a bridge between a third AD and a first AD, depending on their skill set and depending on the requirements of the shoot. It is a nebulous job. This job title doesn't specifically have any set job requirements. They just kind of fill in the gaps when the size of the production is way too large for one person or two people to be handling everything. So say you have multiple distant teams or multiple cameras or special units. Say you're filming an assassination scene and you want to do it all in one because it would just be a logistical nightmare to completely separate the shoot into a single camera shoot. So you're shooting multi-cameras. So you would have a camera and an actor, a principal actor, on a rooftop, and you would have a bunch of background, a bunch of crowd, a bunch of essays, and a couple of principal actors down on the ground, and they are physically far away from each other. You might have a floor second on whichever floor is more important, or less important, or whatever. You would have a floor second with one camera and a first AD with another camera. You might have multiple floor seconds, sometimes it happens. Or you might have a third AD and a first, depending on the size. So that would be something like multiple teams or special units, like a roof unit or a drone unit. Or it's not necessarily a splinter unit. It's not that you're shooting something separately, but your floor second might go with a splinter unit. They might, second unit, so say if you have a complete separate second unit, you would have a second unit team that's different. A floor second stays with the main team, but sometimes you have special units like a battle unit or a spy cam unit, something that is separate and it's different, but it's still capturing the same main unit stuff, but it is its own thing. So you would put a floor second with them to coordinate and oversee that people in front of camera do what they're supposed to be doing and the cameras are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then sticking with village. So village is video village, but sometimes they're just calling it village. Sticking with village or the director's tent. Sometimes, again, a director might be completely in a separate location, very, very far away, because we're shooting on a mountain and it's in a cave in a distant location. So the director is somewhere down at the bottom of the hill in a tent, and you have no other means of communication but through radio. And some directors are just like, I don't want a walkie, I don't want to. So you stick an AD with your director and another AD with camera. And in those cases, it's always the first AD who sticks with camera, and it will be a third AD or a floor second who sticks with village or the director's unit. Now we're going into the more traditional AD department. Sometimes your AD department literally just looks like a runner, a third, hopefully a second. On smaller jobs, on smaller budget jobs, a second AD's role can be grossly underappreciated, but if you have a decent sized job, and it all applies for narrative, so commercials are completely different. If you have a decent sized job, then your minimum for an AD team is one of each, a runner, a third, a second, and a first. So in prep, a third AD, if you have the prep money for it, they would come in usually for a day, maybe a half day, and they would take care of radios. They would check, label, and assign radios in advance so that they can distribute them on the day more effectively, and they don't have to do all the labeling on the first day if you have the prep money for it. And if you have even more prep money, then the third AD might be attending a recce. Recce is how this country calls it, and there's a difference between scout and a recce, and it's a very different naming convention in the States. But what we call a recce, I believe it comes from the word reconnaissance, which is it's a second stage of location assessment. So a scout stage would be a locations job when you're finding a location, and your creatives might go on a scout, usually they don't, when you're just figuring out whether this is the right location or not. When you have found the location, you go into a recce stage. When you know that this is where you're going to be shooting, you're just taking your creatives and your technical department heads to suss out the logistics of this specific location. So if they have the money to bring a third AD to recce's, then your responsibility would be to find out the logistics of the space. So as an AD, you would be asking, where is makeup costume going? Where is the tea table? Where is a safe space? Where is kit storage? Where are the closest toilets? Like all the utilitarian, boring stuff that you would be looking out for, how to make this space functional for all of us. Is the road going to be an issue for sound? Are we doing some sound blankets, or do we have to do some blackouts because we're shooting at a time of the day that the sun is not cooperating? And then you're marking all of those things down, so that when you go back into prep, into the production office, you can feed all that information back into the schedule. Because if you have logistical challenges that you have to take care of, then all of those things will add time to the shooting day, and you might need to completely rejig your schedule because you realize that this is a gorgeous location, but it will take 2 hours for us to make it shootable. And that usually happens, that when on the page, something just looks like they walk in, and then you realize that the space that they're walking into, we're changing everything from apart from the four walls. We're putting down a different carpet, we're putting up curtains, we're blacking out, we're doing some special disco lighting, and 200 people are supposed to be marching in. And you're like, oh, okay. So what looks like an eighth of a page on the script, it might be an actual 2 hour setup. So you might need to rejig your schedule based on that. On set during production, as a third AD, you would be distributing and maintaining radios. I see a little boo-boo there. That's just a misguided percentage sign. That's supposed to be 100% in the row above that. So you would be distributing and maintaining radios. Sometimes a third AD would take the responsibility and hand it over to your department that I trust you to just give you a charger, and you have your assigned radios throughout the entire show, and you just hand it back to me in one piece, unbroken, at the end of the shoot. But sometimes some third ADs like to actually handle their radios each and every day. So as a third AD, your responsibility might be for the first hour of every single day and the last 10 minutes of every single day of distributing and collecting radios and making sure that at the end of each and every day, you have at least the right amount of radios. Getting cast 100% before stepping on set. So as a third AD, the higher up the hierarchical chain you're going, the different flavor of the responsibility you have. As a third AD, you're not going to be the one actually traveling cast between trailers or actually making sure that they are 100%, and that means 3 things definitely before they step on set. That's makeup, costume, and sound. But as a third AD, you're responsible that when a first AD is asking whether they are 100%, if you say yes, they have to be 100%. It cannot just be, well, yes, we do need a little mic check, and we do need to adjust something on that costume. If that's the case, communicate that no, they are not 100%, they are ready to step on set, but I'm going to have to pull them back for another 15 for mic adjustments. Or they want to see this color on camera, and if we don't like it, I'm so sorry, we might need to change that shirt, or we might need to adjust that hat, or whatever. So that kind of making sure that cast is 100%, that is purely a third AD responsibility. Dressing background, again, same phrase, means the same thing. If you don't have a specific crowd third, it becomes the third AD's responsibility that as soon as we have non-principal cast, as soon as we have day players or essays or crowd or background, it's a third AD's job to dress them to frame. Now, sometimes some first ADs or even some directors might love that job so much that they're taking over completely, but don't assume. The default setting is that a third AD's responsibility is to dress background. Taking cast and scene timings for the second AD. Now again, it is a shared responsibility between the entire AD department, so it might not always be the third AD who takes every single cast timing, but as a final responsibility, it is their responsibility to send those timings over to the second AD. So on set, you obviously don't know when they arrived and when they have gotten into the chair. You do know when they stepped on set, but that's different. Sorry, how can I differentiate? Because it is step on, but like maybe arrive to set or land or something like that. There could be a difference between traveling to set, landing on set, and stepping on. So stepping on might be 15 minutes after they actually landed. So they arrive by car, they get out of the car, that's when they landed. And then when they step on set is the first time when they step in front of camera, when they are going for a rehearsal, or in some cases they are going straight for a take. And those timings might be 15, 20 minutes apart. And if they are, and that goes on the AD report sheet, many people will start picking at it, that what is taking that long. So it is actually very meaningful, because it all goes back to budget reporting. Information distribution, talked about that, and helping the first AD with peripheral tasks. So a first AD would usually stick with camera, so they would have a smaller circle of people that they're talking to. Usually a first AD doesn't really leave camera's side or the director's side for most of the day. So as a third AD, you're kind of running, well, I don't want to use the word running around, you're responsible for, you're overseeing the rest of the set. And sometimes that physically can be a large space to cover. Second AD, in prep. So as a second AD, you're responsible for cast and everything that goes under that. Sometimes it's like some production departments are very good with this, but some production departments have this weird, especially when you're working with more of a name, more of a household name, some production people freak out about talking to cast. So if you ever aspire becoming a second AD or going through the second AD step, just forget about any kind of inhibition around cast. If you have to call King Meryl Streep, just be like, "Hi Meryl, this is second AD, my name, so lovely to meet you. I just wanted to check in how you're doing and just wanted to update you with what's going on." Not like, "I'm such a fan, I don't know how to call Meryl." So sometimes production are the first people that are actually contacting cast, but sometimes there is nobody between casting director and like executive producers and big level producers and the second AD. Sometimes the second AD is the first person who actually calls cast, whether that's in prep or whether that's during production already, about, "Hey, how you're doing? Have you received the script? Do you have any questions? Do you have any allergies? Do you have any concerns? Are you bringing your dog? Do you need childcare? Do we need to take care of anything?" Like that first introduction and that first chit chat might be coming from the second AD, because it does happen every now and then that in production, everyone just assumes that that's a second AD job, but they're also quite frequently scared of talking to a certain caliber of cast, which I never understood. They are just people. Everyone is just a normal human being. And as a second AD, you would be also organizing fittings, makeup tests, rehearsals. So that all goes under cast responsibilities. If you do have a crowd second, then none of the crowd fittings, none of the crowd rehearsals are your responsibilities. But if you are the only one as a second AD and you don't have a crowd second, you might also be organizing crowd fittings and crowd rehearsals, if that's the case. Usually, if you have a larger number of crowd, you would obviously have a crowd second. But say you only have 2 people who are definitely background, but they're definitely wearing some kind of really customized costume, or they are really specific hairstyle. They're not saying anything, they're just stood in the background, they're definitely not principals, they don't have a single line, but they are quite prominently featured, so a costume department or a makeup department does want to bring them in. So it also becomes your responsibility to organize that, even though they are background. Attending recce's. Now, with a second AD, as a second AD, I have to be honest, I hate attending recce's because it always comes at a time when I have so much to do, and usually you don't have proper internet access when you're going on location, when you're going on a recce. But it is useful for very similar reasons. As a second AD, you are not going to be spending that much time on set, but if by any means you're also recceing base, or at least you're assessing how far base is, it's very useful to attend a recce as a second AD. But if a third is going, honestly, a second AD, unless they really want to, they don't have to, because they're going to get the information anyway. cross-checking breakdowns and schedule. So it is a first AD who creates a breakdown from a script or puts that breakdown into a schedule format. But then as a second AD, sometimes because things change, sometimes because there are new script changes coming in and the first AD is doing something else, it does fall on a second AD to, sometimes they completely take over the schedule, sometimes they just manage the schedule or start changing things, but it is a second AD's responsibility to make sure that every single script change or departmental request or location that needed to be completely changed or creative ideas that come in the last second, they do make it into every breakdown sheet and everything that gets distributed to other departments, and that they are responsible for just double checking, just cross checking that we are all working to the most up-to-date information so that we are all working towards the same thing. And then I've put crowd breakdown and budget in brackets because if you're the only second AD and you don't have a crowd second, you will have to do the crowd breakdown and you will have to manage the crowd budget. During production, chaos communication, still the same case, getting them to set on time. So again, as a second AD, it's not your responsibility to make sure that they go into the trailer on time or that they get out of the chair on time. You kind of hand that management responsibility over to your base PA. But at the end of the day, it is your responsibility that it happens and that CAS does get to set on time. So you might not be physically the one standing outside trailers and knocking on doors, but you are in constant communication. And as a more senior role, you are the responsible one, not the PA, to make sure that things happen the way they are supposed to be happening. You're also responsible for the call sheet, and you are in constant communication with departments. So the more moving elements you have, actually the more complex it is to put a call sheet together. It's not just paperwork. Some people just look at it as just a complicated Excel sheet. When you have certain requirements, special requirements from departments, you might not just be thinking a day ahead for the call sheet. You might also be thinking weeks ahead, or sometimes months ahead. Hardly ever happens, but weeks ahead. When you're like, oh, have we booked this special equipment for a fire? Have we made sure that we have a horse carriage that is the right size that fits through a gate? Have we talked about, I don't know, floor matting or floor coverage for this muddy field that we'll have to go through? So a second AD would be cross-checking with other departments whether they are going ahead with their prep and they are thinking ahead just as much as the second AD is thinking ahead. So you are in constant communication with every other department, not just in terms of what goes on the call sheet, but making sure that everything that goes into the day actually is happening in the background. Second AD report. It's a piece of paper with a bunch of timings of cast timings and scene timings. I'm more than happy to send a template if you're interested in how a second AD report sheet looks. But it's a record of timings, and again, it is useful for investors, for a bond company, for distributors, the money people, for executive producers, for producers, to make sure that what we promised, what a schedule promised, what a first AD promised, is actually happening on time, which means within budget. And a report sheet is just a daily flow of communication that makes sure that 6 weeks down the line, we don't just go back and be like, this is a complete mess. Where did we screw up? It's a daily progress of, we might be a little bit behind, but we can pick it up that day, or we made the day perfectly, or we picked something up from 2 weeks from now, and it's actually going in the right direction. Planning ahead for the next day or the next week, managing the schedule. Now, during production, it usually is, just because the first AD physically doesn't have any more time to change a schedule or to think ahead for in terms of scheduling order. It usually, the schedule gets handed over to the second AD, and if there are any changes, we had a production meeting at the middle of the day, or we went on a little location recce and something needs to be changed in the schedule, it is the second AD usually who physically changes it. And it is, again, the first AD's responsibility to sign off on it, make sure that they're happy. But physically, it is usually the second AD who does those changes just because of time. Liaising with talent management teams. Now, again, if you have a more hands-on production department, it might be somebody from production who takes over this responsibility. But sometimes production doesn't want to do anything with talent management. So as a second AD, you might end up being very good friends with managers and agents for your cast, and you might be getting very special, very specific requests. It might be that an actor needs some kind of special nutrition or a special training, or a birthday is coming up, or a dog or childcare or something, or they have a commercial shoot in the middle of your shoot, and you have to organize that to get them to the airport in the middle of your shoot. And that all goes through talent management, their management team, their managers, their agents, their assistants. And you as the second AD, you're the one in communication with a specific actor's management team, sometimes to organize stuff that has nothing to do with the actual physical shoot, but for some weird reason, cast is treated as your responsibility while you're shooting. So even if it's non-shoot related, as a second AD, you end up managing the communication and making sure that stuff happens that might have nothing to do with your shoot. Cast transport. So if you don't have anybody else, if you don't have an APOC, or if you don't have a base third doing this, then as a second AD, your responsibility also includes cast transport, booking crowd, liaising with crowd agencies, and creating and distributing sides, which are a lovely part of being a second AD if you're extremely understaffed and if you have a very small production team, because these kind of jobs all can be distributed to some production assistant or a production secretary or an assistant production coordinator, or to transport department or to locations department. Somebody could also be taking care of these jobs, but it usually all falls back on a second AD to actually do it and make it happen, which can be a very thankless job. But I genuinely do love second AD for reasons. First AD. In prep, you would do a script breakdown, a schedule from that script breakdown. You would be responsible for head of departments, HOD meetings to iron out logistics. You would be attending recce's, and you would be leading a PPM. A PPM is a pre-production meeting. So I hope that all of the above are quite self-explanatory, so I'm only going to go into PPM. Now, leading a PPM, again, is such a thankless job because I have no idea why is it the first AD's responsibility, but it always is. A pre-production meeting is usually in person because it's just a lot easier than on Zoom, but if we have to do it on Zoom, sometimes it happens on Zoom, but usually it is people sitting together in one room, at least one person from each department. It usually is a department head, but if it's a designer and they're doing something else, it might be a supervisor level. But at least one person from each department. Sometimes it's more. So sometimes you might end up with 30 people in a room, just all listening to you, looking at you, expecting you to lead a meeting, usually in the somewhere towards the end of prep, when everybody is a bit under time crunch and being a bit finicky about particular details that haven't been ironed out yet. So production meetings, pre-production meetings can become a tense environment when you are just ironing out details on the meeting. If a meeting is just about making sure that we are all on the same page and things are happening in the right pace and at the right time, then it flows, then it's gorgeous. But I have been on pre-production meetings when we tried to figure things out in the room, because that was the first time that certain departments actually were able to talk to each other, just purely time reasons. So leading a PPM is a first AD's responsibility, because we usually go through in schedule order the shooting order. So we talk about the entire shoot in schedule order, which means we're talking about all the requirements of most of the sets. It might not be every single scene, and it might not be every single set. We might just gloss over that. Yeah, we know what we're doing with that, just skip it. We talked about it more than enough, that's fine. But usually most of the sets, locations, cast requirements, all of that is broken down in schedule order, in shooting order, and you literally go through your entire shoot led by the first AD, just because it's in schedule order. During production, timekeeping and optimization. So timekeeping aspect of it is, hopefully that's very self-explanatory, but the optimization is a skill that I genuinely think that it only develops with time, because a huge part of time optimization is people optimization as well. Because sometimes you find personalities who from the get-go you can tell that somebody is just a slower pace, somebody is a faster pace, and they will have to work together. So you find yourself kind of mediating in between those paces or worldviews or stylistic choices. And sometimes one request is more important or more logical than the other request. And you have to manage expectations, you have to manage sometimes egos, you have to manage a concept of time and a concept of reality for a lot of people, in terms of, look, I understand that this is what we want, this is what the creative request is, and I'm, as a first AD, it's never our job, because it's technically a logistical job, not a creative job. It has creative aspects, but it's a more logistical, more utilitarian job. As a first AD, it's never my style to tell someone that this is what they have to do. It's my job to offer up options. Look, if you want this, these are the consequences. If we do that, these are the results. Which one do you want? And it's a soft skill to present it in a way that it doesn't feel like you're overstepping your boundaries, but you are obviously pushing towards the more optimized solution, because it saves time, because it saves the hassle, because it saves a costume change or a lighting change or a whatnot, even though it might clash with creative expectations. Communication, mood, space, morale. That was one of my first AD jobs, when sometimes people like misunderstand or don't even understand what an AD is. So I use phrases like I speak for a living, or I'm going to be the loudest voice on set. Sometimes I don't even say that I'm the first AD. Sometimes I just say that, hi, I'm Alex, I'm going to be the loudest voice on set. Because it was a lovely little thing when somebody misunderstood first AD for first lady. I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. I'm the first lady. And somebody called me a DJ of the set. So I like that, and I much prefer that to a conductor of an orchestra. A DJ is responsible literally for setting the pace, the mood, the rhythm of the entire floor. That's how I look at myself as a first AD. I'm responsible with my tone, with my pace, with my intonation, with my cadence, with just all of this, and all of this body language is responsible for the entire room's energy, cohesion, mood, rhythm. And if I get into a good harmony with them, then we're all vibing. If I'm playing something that doesn't jive with the crowd, then we're clashing. And then that can be extremely chaotic and very stressful. Being the bridge between producers and the director. So producers are obviously interested in some producers are a lot more creative, but some producers are genuinely just interested in making the day happen and making sure that we deliver a product on time, in budget. And directors are usually fighting their corners for more time, more space, more spaciousness, more rehearsals, more takes, more whatever. And you're mediating literally between those two sometimes directly opposing points of views. It can be fun, it can be challenging, but it's definitely nobody else's responsibility. Sometimes big personalities step in, sometimes a big personality DP or a big personality production designer steps in and takes over that mediation role because they have their own idea about what this film needs. Usually they're fighting their own corner. They want more and they take the director's side. That's what usually happens. But as a job role, it is definitely the AD's responsibility to make sure that we strike a balance between those sometimes opposing points of view. Managing people, relationships, and expectations. Sometimes, as a first AD, all I do is look at a shot list, and if I see that it's a very large number of shots, I very bluntly break it down to numbers. Look, we have this amount of shooting hours, minus breaks, minus lunch, minus prep, minus resets, minus costume changes, physical this amount of shooting hours, and we have this many shots, so that means we will have 3 minutes per setup. I mean, if we want, I'm not saying it's impossible if we want to make it, but it's a shooting style. If we want to have a different shooting style, this will have to radically reduce. And sometimes it's a thankless job to just remind people how time works. And it also happens on set. It's a dynamic thing when you have to constantly manage those expectations that, look, listen, sometimes time just flies by and we're not going to have the time for what we really wanted to do. Instead, we could do this. Leadership and actioning tasks. I thought about my job for a very long time as management, and it literally hit me, I think 3 years ago on a job. It was in prep when it was an art department where the art director was just away from prep, and he was just physically not present. And it was me with an art department junior, and we were waiting for something like a custom-made prop to be made. And she just had questions, and she couldn't get through to the art director, and she just literally needed some actioning. Yes, no, make it happen. And I'm obviously, as an AD, I'm not responsible for the aesthetics. I'm not responsible, and I should not overstep boundaries with whether this is the right design, whether this is the right color, the right prop, the right make, model, material, whatever. She just needed, should I make this? Should I go ahead with this? Just needed a yes or no. Yes. Try it, show it. If we don't like it, we move on. But instead of her waiting for making something, sometimes as an AD, especially with junior roles, all they need is actioning. Or somebody who needs to come on set, whether that's a makeup standby, whether that's an art department standby, somebody just literally just waiting just outside set, waiting for us to tell them that, yes, this is the right time to come step on set. Or somebody who's like, oh, I need to take care of this, I need a booking, I need to call a lighting company, whatever. Can I step off? Is this the right time for me to step off? And you go, we're about to go, in 20 seconds. Let's do it after this take. No, this is the right time. This is going to take 10. Go do it. Actioning is a huge part of what we're doing. Leadership, aware leadership, is a huge part of the AD department's responsibility. And I love working with a set etiquette where people understand that it is our responsibility, and they don't overstep those boundaries, and they don't just step off, they don't just step on, but that there is that communication flow. Because if we say that we are information distribution, it also means that we are aware of more than anybody else on set. So it makes sense that that is the respectful and the logical thing to do, to check in with someone who has more information, whether this is the right thing to do at this time, than to just go ahead and do whatever you want. Some sets have that set etiquette, and it's gorgeous to work like that. Health and safety briefings. Safety briefings are more and more common, happening at the beginning of every single day or every single location, like new location, and they are very useful. But you also have to be aware of it, that sometimes people don't like to listen to those things. Sometimes even directors and DPs frown upon it because it takes away 5 minutes from the shooting day. So if it is necessary, you do have to bring in a personality that makes it palatable. And that's where we circle back to the soft skills. And then signing off on the call sheet is the last thing that I have on this. So again, the second AD's responsibility is to prepare, make sure that it is ready to go, but it is the first AD every single day, whether that's the very end of the day, whether that's the middle of the day, whether you know that, yes, nothing is going to change, whether you're like, oh, I just need to have a look at it at the very end of the day. It might change. I might change something. It is the first AD who at the end of the day, or like at the end of the process, says, yes, good to go. I'm signing off on this. This is what I actually want to distribute. Now, let's get to your questions. I hopefully included, yes, jump in. I did go over my time. Sorry. I try to speak.
That's all right. Thank you, Alex. That was great.
I do remember some of your questions. So what I wanted to mention, especially with finding a job or transitioning from unscripted to scripted. So the transition from unscripted to scripted, I might not be the right person to speak about because I've never worked in unscripted. So I only have assumptions about how unscripted works. But what I would say from my side is we are such a, I don't want to use the word nepotistic, but it is nepotistic. We're such a people industry that you really have to make yourself known personally to the people that you want to work with. It hardly ever happens that if they never heard about you and they see a CV that might have the right transferable skills, but they don't see any record of the stuff that they are specifically looking for, hardly anyone takes a chance on you like that. But if you meet the same person in person, or at least on Zoom, and you talk around your skills, even that little personal touch changes that hiring position's perception of you. And that changed perception is going to people that you want to work with or want to work for, and get in touch with them through better means than just an email. Get them, get in the same room with them, ask them for a coffee, ask their advice, get them on Zoom, and actually show your face and share your voice. And then with finding consistent work, pretty much the same. So finding work as a third AD or finding consistent work as a third AD or transitioning from commercials or a different department, very much the same advice. If people tell you to go on a specific job website or sign up with a specific agency, everyone's journey is different. For some people, it works out well. For statistically, the majority of people, it can be a waste of time. And you get more, you get a better return on investment for your time if you make yourself personally known to the people that you want to work with. And then I think the only thing that I left out was about driving. Now I might be a bit controversial about driving. I still don't drive and I still don't have a car. After 14 years in this country, I can drive, but I haven't driven on this side of the road because obviously I'm not from around here. And I didn't have, in the beginning, I didn't have the money. Then after a few years, I didn't have the courage. Then after a few years, I couldn't be bothered to actually buy a car and pay for insurance and all that. So what I would say about, do I need a car to work in this industry? It's a choice of what you actually want to do. If you just want to make money, it's very beneficial to have a car because you're going to get more jobs like that. But you're not necessarily going on set. Most likely, you're going to be driving, dropping off, picking up, unless they specifically ask for a car because it's such a remote location that you will have to get yourself to set. And once you're on set, you stay on set. So your car is only for your personal convenience. And in that cases, this girl figured out how to get to the middle of nowhere without a car because I wanted to. So that's my responsibility. So if you just want to get jobs and if you just want to get money, it's beneficial. But if you want to be an AD, it's not necessary. It might be harder to find the right that's not true. The right jobs are exactly the same difficulty to find. The more things you see advertised are the things that are looking for drivers, but the reason they're looking for drivers is because they're looking for a driver, not a runner. They're looking for someone who will pick stuff up, drop stuff off, and you might not spend any time on set. So you might not learn anything. They just want somebody to take care of the peripheral stuff. So if you want to stay on set, sometimes it can be beneficial that, I'm sorry, I don't drive, I don't have a car, so you will have to be the runner who stays on set. But that's just my 2 cents. Thank you for your time, and sorry for going on. I try to speak as fast as possible.
Alex, I think Liz had a question.
Yeah.
I'm
just looking at the chat now. Lewis, finding myself getting more drawn to crowd. Good tips for dressing them in. Ooh, okay. So, with dressing crowd, the thing that you don't want to have is you don't want to take attention away from the main action. So, unless you're specifically asked, dressing is a stylistic choice. So after a while, you will develop that photographic view of a frame that if you have a point of focus, whether that's bang on middle of the frame or whether that's somewhere, some corner because it's a funky framing, wherever your center of focus is, wherever your main people are, don't do anything busy behind them. Don't do any major crosses. Don't put people who are gesticulating super loudly behind them. Do things that, whether that's a still positioning or whether that's a movement that drives the attention towards that point of focus. Create a pleasing looking frame, unless you're specifically asked for, I want to have more movement, I want to have more wipes, blah, 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 blah. And then think about layers. So obviously the foreground and the very deep background are the interesting stuff because usually your main people are midground. So it's useful to leave midground a bit more empty and just making sure that you don't run out of people in the background and in the foreground. With foreground, it's a lot easier to create a sense of a filled, crowded space, a busy space. So if you really only have 5 people to work with, leave 3 of them in the foreground and only 2 in the background, or even 4 of them in the foreground and just 1 of them in the background, and use them in a way that can look like a crowded room. You know, if you're doing a club scene and you're only working with this frame and 5 people, it might be more beneficial to put 1 person in deep background with a drink in their hand, like right in between your actors in a way that it's not distracting, and then put shoulders in the foreground so it looks like that you're shooting through a crowd. It's a stylistic choice, and your creativity, sometimes that's why people enjoy crowd or enjoy thirding, because it can become very creative. Your creativity is a visual choice to make sure that you're emphasizing what's happening and not taking attention away from it. What other departments good to go into to help get into AD department? I mean, if you can handle production or if you can handle locations, by all means. So I didn't want to single out anyone, but it's worth mentioning them. The Cold Time company is very good at in this trainee level, getting people into the industry, because they can give you quite a lot of daily jobs on bigger sets, but most of them will be in locations. So being a location marshal, being a location assistant, and then you can work your way into the AD department, because on bigger jobs you might have 20 marshals and 4 ADs. So locations is a good department to go into, but it can be an extremely thankless job in locations. Production is something very similar. If you find a production assistant job that, say, spends more time in the office, and again, you make yourself known to the production team, you get on well with the second AD, because they usually stay at base or stay with production. You make yourself known to the first AD or the other PAs when they come to the office. That can be, if you have the skills and the willingness for production, that can be a very cushy way of making yourself known, because you're physically spending a long time with them. Locations, the other downside of it is that usually you're by yourself for most of the day. If you're on set in any other department, it's very likely that you're pretty lonely for most of the day in junior roles. When you're in an office setting, you are going to be with 4, 5, 6 people in an office for 8, 10, 12 hours of a day. So that can be a good way in. Regarding disability in the industry, I'm hoping that I'm not missing out any questions. Disability in the industry. I noticed in your website mentioned an advice for inclusion. Yeah, of course, yeah. Email me about inclusion. So I mean, I definitely have undiagnosed ADD. I don't think it's ADHD. And I mention it extremely frequently that I come from a very shaky mental health background. So yes, email me about inclusion if you want to. All of my email address is all very publicly available. If you go on Callbox is my diary service. You can literally find my CV, find my email address. You're more than welcome to contact me. Good. Production. Oh, so I'm very biased. Yes. Production is a thankless job.
Yeah.
Good. Anything that I missed?
I'll just have a quick look.
So somebody asked me this lovely question of something that stuck with me from set, whether it's good or bad. And I was really trying to find something good, because I don't want to say a horror story. I genuinely don't want to be like, oh, it's too easy to say something bad. So many bad things have happened to us. And I also have so many good stories, but I'd rather say something general rather than just something super specific. So the thing that really gets stuck with me are the sets when something happens. So maybe it's just me, but based on my little market research, it is a quite common experience that throughout a long-term career, you will have more bad experiences and more bad sets than good sets. Because it all comes down to communication, and it all comes down to people, and there's hardly any money in prep to design a team that will function well together personality-wise. So they might have the right skills, but they might not be the right people to work together. And there's very little design going into actually putting together a team that are humanely good together. So sets can become incredibly toxic and abusive and inhumane environments. So what really sticks with me for years, probably for my entire lifetime, is that when a combination happens, that it flows, it's not necessarily a question of money. So it happened to me on very small jobs on very low budget. It happened to me on commercials. It happened to me in narrative. It happened on short films. It happened on 3-month jobs. When the chemistry between people works and the set genuinely flows like a harmony, those are the moments. that make you feel like that when you go on a horrible set and you feel like that you don't belong, you feel like that this is not how things should be running, this is not okay, I don't want to stay here, I don't fit in, I feel like I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm just, this is not okay. That feeling, without the good, can get to you very easily, and people can turn that against themselves, that I'm not good enough. But if you have had those experiences where you do feel like that you belong, you do feel like that you know exactly what you're doing, that you're respected and valued and appreciated, those can become your lifetime anchors and mind savers and lifesavers to say that if I think that something is wrong, I might not be at fault. It might be that there is something genuinely, objectively wrong with this situation, and I'm able to at least acknowledge and say to myself that I know better because I've experienced better. So if it can go that way, it shouldn't go this way. And I'm really hoping that that mentality can change the future of the industry. Higher up on the ladder you are, the more you're firefighting as well. Lower roles are usually shielded from them. Well, depending on what firefighting is, I remember a lovely lunch production meeting where it was a chaotic shoot. It was a feature film, and it was production and ADs. And I remember one of the runners bringing up something about food, like something about catering, like something wasn't right about catering. And I remember production freaking out that is the least amount of our problem. That is the smallest thing in the very back of our minds, whether catering is working well, because it's a huge, I don't know, we are fighting fires. But from their perspective, that was the biggest thing, because that's what they're getting the grief for. That's what crew is grilling them for the entire day. So fighting fires can be extremely subjective, and pressure on every single level can feel immediate in the body. And when somebody is working under that stress, it does make you feel like that you are fighting fires. So there are different levels of fires, but junior levels or I don't want to call them lower because they're not. Different levels can experience the same intensity and the same stress of firefighting for the entire day. They just might be different calibers of fire.
Good. Does anyone else have any questions?
Qualification. Oh, that as a runner. Oh, okay. That's quite different. Okay, so first aid certified. Yes. I mean, so like my certification like ran out like 3 years ago. To be fair, like I got first aid certified probably in the first few months of running, and while I was running, nobody ever asked me. Nobody ever cared about it. So again, horses for courses. Yes, it is also useful to get a first aid certification, not just for the knowledge itself, obviously. Some of it, most of it is extremely common sense. Some of it is useful knowledge. So it is useful for the knowledge base as well. But I think what makes it more interesting is not necessarily the fact that you have, or sorry, the other way around, not necessarily the certificate that you have, because hopefully someone else in production or ADs will also have a certificate, but it's the level of commitment. So in the beginning, I started collecting trainings, and there are a lot of free or extremely cheap trainings that you can just put on your CV. Things like, I think Screen Skills are definitely doing this, things like anti-bullying, anti-harassment, unconscious bias, mental health, leadership, blah, 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 blah. It just means that you're willing to invest into your career, and you're taking yourself professionally, and you're thinking about a long-term career. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. So I keep saying this to every level, that if you know the next level that you want to go to, start acting like that level. So the reason why I went through every single level is because if you know what the next level of responsibilities are, what the requirements are, how you can stand out, especially on set, is by starting to not overstepping boundaries, not being the big man in the room, by just quietly but visibly start acting like that next job title, because then they will see that you are demonstrating the skills. Same thing, if it's just a piece of paper, if you have the means, if you have the money, or, it's a tricky question, or especially if it's free, do things like, what's the safety for children, safeguarding for children, or children on set, or crowd management, or whatever training you can get your hands on. Stick them on your CV, because if they only see a piece of paper, it shows that you are interested in the next job title. What I often say to runners is start taking timings. It might not be you who sends those timings over to the second AD, it might be the third AD. But if the third AD sees that you are taking every single timing that they are taking, they can at some point outsource their job to you, which means you technically start doing the third AD's job, which means when that third AD at some point gets sick on a 3-month job, you're going to be the one stepping up. And then on the next job with a different production team or the same production team, you're going to be the one picked out from the crowd saying, this person is already doing this job, let's give them the opportunity. So in terms of training and skills, if you start looking at one level above and start acting like that, people will start looking at you like that. Back to mental health first aid, yes. Other qualification mentioned except for mental health first aid. So again, I'm a mental health first aider. I didn't do it through back to, so I don't want to poo-poo anyone, and I genuinely don't remember which company I did my mental health first aid with, but it wasn't a film company, so at least I'm not shitting where I'm eating. It was 2 times 3 hours on Zoom, and most of it was extremely common sense, and none of it was really tangible and really actionable. So yes, very useful, very helpful for many reasons to get the qualification. I'm just a little bit bitching about the quality of the qualification that we're providing right now, because I've been on sets before where we had specifically dedicated mental health responsible people with the fancy job titles, and they were some of the most abusive sets that I've ever been on. So there is a mismatch between the qualification and the real world application, and we haven't been able to bridge that gap just yet.
Well, I think that's everything. Thank you so much, Alex. That was brilliant. And if anyone has any other questions, please get in touch.
Yes.
If anyone has any questions regarding to set starters, I have pinned my email there. Please feel free to send me an email. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great day and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you very much. See you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.